I'm excited, y'all, because today we're going to talk about regenerative agriculture. What is it, and why is it blossoming in southern Missouri? And when I grow up, I want to be a regenerative rancher, and you should too. Moving to southern Missouri is the best thing I've ever done for my family. So this video is definitely mostly for newbies like me who just kind of need an outline of what is this thing and who's doing it and why, and what's so special about doing it in Missouri. But also for you seasoned regenerative ranchers, why are you not doing it in southern Missouri? I think you'd be hard pressed to find better grass in most states with the abundant water supplies, where you can literally do your rotational grazing and not just have automatic waters, have ponds. Pretty special. So what is regenerative agriculture? And the truth is, this term is very, very broad. It is used really for anything that is a system of producing food that first and foremost considers the health of the land. A lot of people would then go further to say that regenerative agriculture doesn't just maintain the health of the land, it actually continually evolves it. And a lot of people are using these practices to bring back land that was near barren, and they're bringing it back to what you would call pristine if you just looked at it. And that's what makes it incredibly special. And to go further, to talk about that evolution, the evolution of the land's health goes hand in hand with the management of the animals and what other food is being produced. And it's going to continually build upon the natural systems that land and those animals, right? All of those different niches and ecosystems would have already had in place, but then using those natural systems with, a capitalistic agricultural model and having them be as much in harmony as possible. So, although I'm talking about this very broad term that's regenerative agriculture, really, in cattle ranching, it's definitely really focused on the grazing practice. And so there's different terms that people use. Some people talk about high rotational grazing, mob grazing, strip grazing, management intensive grazing. I'm sure there's some other terms. In fact, I know I'm forgetting a few, but they all pretty much mean the same thing. Right? Now, there can be little differences. Like, for example, strip grazing is usually you have kind of this rectangular field and you're going to be moving the cows from one side of the pasture to the other in these narrow strips of pasture, usually narrow strips of pasture, and you're moving them really frequently. Now, how often should you move them? That really depends on how much land you have and also your life. How many town jobs are you working? How many kids do you have? There are a lot of things that play into it, but definitely a lot of ranchers are getting success with really regenerating their land by moving the cattle every day. I have heard, and I don't know, this would be high rotational grazing. I've heard about farmers moving them twice a day. So put a comment down below if you know any specifics about that. I kind of felt like that was like a little bit too much. They almost need to get some more farm chores or something. I personally think once a day is whoa, that would be the absolute pinnacle for me. I would feel so successful if I was able to move my cattle once a day to a new piece of grass. But there's everything in between as well. I mean, some people are moving them once a week, right? But the idea is frequently moving animals. Now, there is research to support that it needs to be done pretty frequently. And so as you dig into it, you're gonna find out, looking at kind of the bacterial and parasitic load of the feces, right? That's part of this system. How the grass gets broken and smashed into the ground, that is part of the system. Everything that the animal is going to be doing on that land actually needs to be considered and watched. right? So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but basically it's moving cows frequently to fresh grass and not just letting them graze and range for long periods of time in one open pasture. And that's where you start to see, the well-worn muddy paths, the big worn out muddy spots by all the watering holes. And especially if you're supplement feeding, you have these huge parts of the grass that become mud holes, right? You never see that with proper rotational grazing. The first reason is just basic, good old capitalistic affordability of production and profitability of your enterprise. I think that a lot of cattle ranchers, at least the ones that are on a smaller scale, are suffering with all of the high cost inputs that regular conventional ranching became so accustomed to. So we can talk about grain feed, really not just fertilizers, but pesticides and herbicide use on the farm. Also, expensive kind of Western medications, antibiotics, a lot of vet bills because your cows aren't doing well on a lot of grain, and so many other little things. All of those factors have made it really, truly hard for the small ma and pa rancher to turn a profit. And that's why, probably actually the number one reason why I'm hearing about a lot of conventional ranchers moving to more regenerative practices here in southern Missouri is the first thing is that they don't want to spend $30,000 to $50,000 to fertilize their grass, and they're also noticing that it no longer has the production, boom that it used to. The grass is no longer doing well. And even hearing ranchers talk about fertilizers that used to give them this huge boom crop are now killing and burning the grasses. And maybe that is just long-term sustained use. There's a lot of factors that could go into that. We are also in a drought cycle here in Missouri, but honestly, I think it probably has to do more with the fact that they've just absolutely zapped their soil fertility, and that eventually it's like a ticking clock for those kind of practices, and eventually the soil is left inert, and no matter what you spray on it, it just ain't gonna grow like it used to. It's one reason I love talking to ranchers and farmers in Missouri who are organic farmers or ranchers, and they're embracing a lot of these practices, but not from the kind of obnoxious liberal, I'm gonna save the planet with all of my lofty environmental standards. Instead, it's just it's affordable and my grass is doing really good. And I've also talked to a lot of ranchers who embrace 100% grass-fed because they are saving tens of thousands of dollars on grain. It's just coming from a very no-nonsense place, and I can really appreciate it. And I just want to interrupt for 1 minute to ask you guys, if you're finding value in this video and you want to see videos like this spread on YouTube, if you could just click that subscribe button or give it a like. That helps, the robots know that humans want to embrace regenerative agriculture. The second factor that has led to a boom of regenerative agriculture in southern Missouri is actually the government. And I never thought that I would say those words together. So in Missouri, we do have a government program. I believe it's funded through a grant, and it allows you to get paid back, not in full, but pretty close, for your fencing and your water costs. And some of those can be pretty pricey. I know a farmer who was our neighbor at our past property, and I think he was paid back about $16,000, maybe it was a little bit more, maybe it was $18,000 of the project he had just put in to at least do hard perimeter fencing, and then he was doing the strip grazing and had electric fencing that he was moving, and he had central auto waters in those fields. And all in all, I know that he had paid a little bit more than that. So I want to say that the program paid him back about 3/4 of what he had spent, which is not bad. A lot of people do not want to do this program because it does tie you into, I believe, a 10-year kind of like contract with a government. And here's where it gets a little bit dicey, and I don't know the details of this. If you want me to do some research, just put a comment below and I can actually get you hooked right up to the guy that pretty much is the one that is taking care of a lot of, cash outs for this program. But the reason why people are not excited about this program is because there are some stipulations on the size of your herd. So the whole program is written really favorably towards regenerative agriculture. So I don't know all of the stipulations, but I'm going to guess that there's probably a minimum amount of pastures that need to be maintained and managed so that you can truly call it high rotational grazing. And I do know that they don't want too large of herds that would then overgraze those pastures. So I haven't dug in to the details myself, but what's really neat is I know ranchers who have successfully used it, and it's just exciting because their success stories are so inspiring, with the grant money or not, right? With that relationship with the government or not, they're now seeing their land just become so productive. So, I've got no skin in the game when it comes to all these different government grant programs. I know a lot of people around here are using a program, I believe, that comes from the Department of Natural Resources, and I get why some people are wary of that because DNR is an incredibly stringent regulatory branch of the government here. And a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouths from DNR policies. So I totally understand. But here's what I think is cool is that I know a lot of local, just regular conventional farmers that I truly believe wouldn't have taken that step towards regenerative ranching if it wouldn't have been for that incentivized program. And so, gosh, I rarely am congratulatory towards government, local, state, or federal. It's just very rare that I ever say anything positive. But this is actually something that does seem really positive to me. And the ranchers that I know that are doing the program haven't felt like it was too restrictive, and for them, they have found increased profitability. And I want to share a quick story from that same neighbor that was at the homestead where we moved from. I believe he was 3rd or 4th generation rancher, and he had become just so inspired. So he did the government program. He also then found out about Judy and did his program, and he just seemed so inspired. And what he told us is that he hadn't seen grass of that quality since his great-grandparents. And I just thought that was so cool. And he loved that land. That land had been handed on, through the ages, but, probably starting with his grandparents, everything became high input, really, just layers of chemical fertilizers. And he had really seen the land suffer. And that's what's really cool about these practices is you just have to have eyes to see. And a pocketbook, if your pocketbook's swelling or decreasing, these things are not rocket science. And so after doing Greg's program and then also, doing the government program, he just followed it, followed the programs and just watched his land get healthier and healthier and made more and more money and saved on all of those costly inputs. And that's something that even the most, anti-government of us can appreciate. So the last factor I want to talk about and why regenerative agriculture has really taken root here in southern Missouri is not a what, but a who. So I'm sure most of you have heard about Joel Salatin. He's definitely gotten a really big name for himself. He's, I would say, probably one of the most kind of famous regenerative farmers and ranchers. And maybe a little bit less known, but not here in Missouri, is Judy, a protege of Joel Salatin's. I feel like Judy has been so influential. In fact, I would say he's the most influential regenerative rancher here in Missouri, and that's because a lot of different walks of life that I know in terms of ranchers feel comfortable with him and have gone to his workshops and have learned from him. Here's what I can say. Regenerative ranching is amazing because there isn't really like a certain type of person that's embracing it. And what's cool, just like I said, it is increasing profitability of small ranches and farms all over the country. And it's being embraced by all different kinds of walks of life. But if you're someone like me that grew up in like, liberal, organic farming and all of that, there were other movements that were really inspirational too, but that were so environmentally focused and so kind of with so much of a liberal mindset that I think that they kind of turned off some of those conservative conventional ranchers who otherwise could have got on board. So like a lot of the permaculture permaculture movements, I'm going to be honest, a lot of conventional ranchers didn't flock to those movements, but we're seeing them flock to regenerative ranching. And I have to say, I do think it's in part because of mentors like Judy, who are they just look like good old ranchers from Missouri. And there's not a lot of it's not so much about environmental hype, about just loving your land. And I think that it's something that all walks of life, all ranchers can embrace when it's not being put in this climate change or any kind of weird environmental framework. And it's just talking about the land. Not the environment, but the land. Actually, as I say that, I realize what is so special about regenerative agriculture is that at the same time, it holds to improving the land as a system while making farmers and ranchers more profitable. And I believe that all walks of life should embrace that, except for vegans. So some proof that Judy has also had a lot of influence here is he actually just came to Seymour, Missouri in Webster County, and they had the grand opening of a PowerFlex retail store, which is if you watch his videos, it's definitely, it seems to be his fencing of choice. And I'm pretty sure he uses the models for the most part. I think he has different, farms, and then he has this lease land, but he's pretty much, I think, doing the hard perimeter fencing and then doing the cross fencing that is electric and then, consistently moving it. So what they have is these fiberglass, fiberglass fence posts, and they're supposed to be amazing. So for a little while, we actually had some cooney pigs. We're definitely not gonna do pigs until we have more acreage. We've decided, we had too many species on a small 5-acre piece. And we sold some to these folks who actually live just a little bit down the road from us. And they're from California too. And they are crushing it. And actually so many of these stories, like Judy's story too, they are of retirement age and they came here to work harder than ever and start an entirely new chapter of their life, which was ranching. They had no experience and they're absolutely thriving. They went up to one of Judy's, I forget what he calls them, but the week-long workshops. And I don't know if there's a certification or what, but they did that program with him and they just came back ranchers, y'all. They're just totally different people. And they bought a beautiful, I think 120 acres down here. They just built a home. They just fixed up this dilapidated ranch and they've got award-winning grasses going on now. And so they knew that they were green. And but they were learning, and they're just like, they have such like passion for it. But they went to be successful. They went up to Greg Judy and they just bought a herd from him. And they said that these are like little trained, like just sweetie pies. Like the cows are so good. And as a horse person, it does make me a little sad because the need for like horses and fancy like cattle work and driving the cattle kind of isn't needed with this type of grazing and ranching, because what they do with these cows they got from Greg Judy is they open up the fence and the cows move. Sometimes when they go one step further, they have to pick up all the fence and they move the fencing, but sometimes it's just letting them into the other side of the strip, right? And that's it. You know, when they have to move like across roads and whatnot, the cows just follow them, just little puppy dogs. So that's another really cool aspect to this type of ranching. Now, that's not to say Greg Judy has the same philosophy that we do. At least on one of his videos, I saw this, where he's like, if there's a problem animal, you sell them, you butcher them, you know what I mean? You do not keep problem animals on the farm or ranch, ever. An interesting side note to Greg Judy's model is that he believes that the type of cow you have is incredibly important. He has found that for southern Missouri, or he's actually in central Missouri, but for Missouri, the South Pole is his favorite species of cattle. And that is because he likes that they're short and stocky. You know, short legs are just better at, like, you know, if there's some rugged terrain or whatever, than kind of leggy animals. And I know that to be true with horses for sure. And he says this about them.
Good day, folks. This is Greg Judy at Green Pastures Farm, talking to you on a beautiful fall day. I get this question a lot, why we selected South Pole cattle as our breed of cows that we run. And you know, we're here in Missouri. We got a lot of Kentucky 31 fescue. We have a lot of heat, humidity in the summertime, and we do get some winters here. Last winter was a pretty good one. We had a lot of snow and cold, but I haven't found any breed yet that'll do as well on fescue and heat and humidity as the South Pole do. They are a slick-hided animal, extremely good mothers, 100% grass. I mean, we don't feed them any grain, and they stay looking like that. And folks, if you can get cows that look like that on grass, she's probably a frame size 3, frame score 3. She's got a great big old gut on her, and she's going to winter really well. She's got a calf on her. And all of our cattle are very, very docile. I like the docility of the South Pole. We can bring strangers into our herd. We just don't have a wild animal in here. Out of 340 some head, there's not anything in here that's afraid of us. They're good mothers. They've got just a really good temperament. You know, we go to tag the calves. I say a cow's got a right to come up and be concerned about her calf. She does not have a right to charge you. If we have a cow that charges us while we're trying to tag a calf, that cow's gone. I just load her up and the calf, gone. Problem fixed.
Another aspect that has been embraced by Greg Judy and is starting to really gain more popularity, I feel like, around here in southern Missouri, is multi-species rotational grazing. And I do feel like sheep has just really kind of exploded. I mean, I'm sure there's always been sheep here because the grass is so good, but I feel like it's really gained a lot of popularity in the last years, and people are now starting to do that multi-species rotation. I've heard a lot of people rotating cattle, sheep, and chickens, and that's when it does get a little bit more kind of a specialized art, because you definitely don't want to put your cattle back on the land or your sheep back on the land too quickly after you've had chickens. So it does take a little bit more finesse, but once you get used to it, it's like, you know the day that you rotate everything, and not really a big deal. I feel like people wait, I want to say 30 days before they move anything back that has had chickens on it, but it could just be 2 weeks. I'll have to look into that. So something you might be wondering is, yeah, that's great for people with big acreage, like you're talking about people with 120 acres, but what about the little guy? What about the people that have like 5 to 20 acres? Can we do regenerative agriculture? And the answer is a resounding yes, my friend. In fact, if you go back to Joel Salatin, who's Greg Judy's, kind of his mentor, that was his model. I can't remember, you guys, we have his book somewhere, but I think he was able to turn a 6-figure income on 20 acres. I'm pretty sure. Leave a comment down below if you remember. But regardless, he was definitely turning a sizable profit from 20-acre pieces, and they were not good pieces of land. This is what's so exciting, is for dirt cheap, he was buying absolutely just depleted land where only thistle will grow. Only the pokies will grow, okay? And I've been there. Actually, our land, the land that I grew up on, only star thistle grew on. And one of the good things that my dad did, yes, he was an absolute train wreck of a human being, but he, no joke, walked that 67-acre piece and hand pulled maybe not all, but enough of that star thistle that grass began to regrow. And it's one of the stories I actually really love that my dad did for that land. But Joel Salatin is taking similar land that is thistles as far as you can see, and he's bringing it back to lush pastures. And of course the model is putting animals on it, but it can't just be that, right? And so, okay, most people do not want to hand pick multiple acres, and I get that. Like my dad and I are kind of a weird, because I have that in me too. It's like just this dogged work thing where it's like, just do this thing for 2 months and then it's done. But all you have to do is get some sort of mowing device, right? You knock that stuff down. And then what Joel Salatin was doing, I'm sure Greg Judy as well, is just he was going to other ranchers and getting rotten, old bales of hay that nobody wanted and laying all that out and just, kind of like doing sheet composting. And just, there is a certain tenacity that you have to have, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that the gains that can be made in your land quality if you are just monotonous, right? So you're gonna consistently take out the weeds. I personally walk and pull them. The last piece we were on, I pulled 11 acres of pokies. Now, it wasn't complete devastation. We had clover and grasses growing too, but I hand pulled all the pokies and I hand sprinkled probably 4 different times the whole property with just wood ash, potash. And by the time we sold that property, it was knee-high clover and almost, taller native grasses. But knee-high clover, I'd actually never seen clover that amazing before. And that was just all by hand. Now, you don't have to be crazy like that, but just get some sort of mowing device and you consistently knock down the stuff you don't want, right? You take that stuff down and then you're gonna be layering stuff on. I personally, because there's so many rotten round bales around here, I don't get the hay practices of Southern Missouri. It's one thing that I do judge a little bit, is I see people go through all the trouble of haying and then leave these huge round bales out and not use them, and they're just these moldy fixtures of the land. Well, that's awesome for regenerative ranchers. You just go around and you either get them for free if you move them or for dirt cheap, and you just unroll those on your land and you start to rebuild the soil, and you can do it in a year. Truly you can. A couple years, if you are consistent, if you are monotonous for a couple years, your land will be gorgeous. Now, I know that sounds intimidating to some of you that maybe haven't had a lot of practice with that kind of dogged work, but I'm telling you, there is no better joy than taking land from desolate to abundant. It's God's work. It truly is. I I think it's the best thing. I think it's the best thing. Really, any kind of, stories of redemption, right? Whether it's people or animals or the land, they're the most inspiring. And that's what regenerative agriculture is. And check out Greg Judy. He does have a video that is how to set up rotational grazing on 5 acres. And we can speak to that a little bit. Now, we weren't really doing any kind of like official practice, but just to talk about how even a tiny little effort can make you a little bit of money. So we had 2 steer. 2. Yes, so we're not ranchers yet. We don't call ourselves ranchers yet, but we had 2 steer on 5 acres. And we did turn a profit. So what we did is we sent both of them to the butcher. We sold quarters, maybe eighths and quarters. I can't remember. I think mostly though quarters. And it's super simple. The people come to the butcher and they pay their own butcher fees. Super easy. And then we would pick up whatever extra money was there. Or no, they'd pay us separate. The butcher fees were the butcher fees, and then we were paid separate. So we sold 1.5 of the steer. We kept a half steer. We filled a giant freezer. We paid for replacements. Like we could have, we haven't yet, but we could have bought new steer. We paid for all of the supplements, whatever we bought supplements. We were feeding them a little bit of like alfalfa cubes sometimes, and then we bought some hay that we were supplement feeding sometimes. And, this, that, and the other. So we paid all that back and turned a profit. And I mean, you could easily just have 2 to 4 cattle and not even be doing like anything, any big program, you know what I mean? Like any big system. And you can be turning a profit, paying all your costs, replacing and growing your herd, and filling freezers. So, I mean, that's very small scale, right? That's a very, very, very small scale example, but it definitely showed me that, cattle is the way to go in terms of like just providing a huge amount of food for your family. All right, you guys, I want to thank you for joining me on this video. And if you've made it to the end, awesome. I bet you're going to move to Missouri and become a regenerative rancher when you grow up, just like me. And I hope that you do. So you guys, I know that I talk about a lot of different subjects, but they're all things near and dear to my heart and why Southern Missouri is such a good place to live. If you are thinking about moving here, please contact me. All my information is in the description. And whether it's in a month or whether it's in a year, I'd like to help you start that journey of finding your forever home here in Southern Missouri. All right, you guys, till the next video. Bye.